Good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck. Today I'm coming to you from one of the busier intersections here in town. And might be a little bit noisy from the traffic. Let me spin it around so I can talk to you. Try to pan slow away from the sun. This is going to be one of my firefighter stories, and the topic today is going to be called traffic signal preemption. And some of you may not know what that is, and I'll try to explain it, but in order to do that I got to talk a little bit about the history behind it. Having a hard time holding the camera steady here. But anyway, this the fire station I used to work at is right behind me down the street here, about 3 blocks. And all the years I worked there, it was the only fire station in town. And much of the development ended up along this stretch of this highway that I was originally showing you here. And what that meant is that meant probably 90% of our responses from our station came down and came through this intersection. Well, we'd had a lot of close calls through the years. There's been a lot of wrecks here, but fortunately we were never involved in any of them. But we had enough close calls that it kind of concerned us about there should be something we can do. This was the second traffic light that was put in town when they started putting traffic lights in. And so as part of our research, this was clear back in 1974, I was the volunteer assistant chief here. We didn't have any paid employees at all. And we bought a new fire engine that year. It was made by a company called Ward LaFrance. And it was called a Ward LaFrance Ambassador. It had the same cab design as the engine that was on the TV show Emergency. The big square cab one that they had, not the first one. The first one was a Crown, but the second one was a Ward LaFrance Ambassador, and we had one like that. And shortly after it was delivered to us, we were asked to take it down to Tucson for a Western Fire Chiefs Conference and display the truck down there. So I was asked, along with one of the other guys, to take the truck down there to do that. And of course that was a pretty exciting thing for a couple of young fire guys to do. But while we were down in Tucson, we got to see a system that they had just installed down there. It was brand new at the time. And the system was called the Opticom system. And it was for controlling traffic lights. And I stood one evening down on an intersection in downtown Tucson, right near the convention center, which was where the conference we were at was being held. And there was a fire station there, and I watched a Tucson engine pull out of there and turn and head down through downtown Tucson. And I watched about 4 or 5 traffic lights in front of it that all magically turned green for this truck to allow it to pass, to give it a green light corridor, so to speak. And that was pretty exciting. Well, fast forward a few years, we're back here. Now I'm the fire chief here, and we're trying to figure out what to do with this intersection behind us. And we were able to install the Opticom system here. And I'm going to tell you how that works. And first of all, I'm going to pan back around and I'm going to show you what the system looks like. I'll pan back around slowly. And I've got to walk to one side here a little bit. But if you notice, right between the 2 red lights above that bus, there's a little black thing mounted to the crossbar on the signal. I'll see if I can put my finger on it. It is right there, right between those 2 cross lights. Well, that's the detector for the Opticom system. And the way it works is there's a light on the emergency vehicle. It's a very, very fast flashing digital strobe light. And that little thing on top of the crossbar will see it coming. And when it sees it coming, it sends a signal over here to the traffic light control box. And basically, if the light is already green, it holds it green. And if the light is red, it puts it through a very quick yellow cycle and turns it light green. So that when the emergency vehicle gets to the intersection, the light's already green for it. It's a great safety feature, little expensive. Even in those days it was kind of expensive, but let me spin you back around here again. but it was the only system we thought would work here. We originally thought about something that operated similar to a garage door opener, or something. And then they also had systems at the time that would turn all the lights red if it heard a siren coming. Well, we try not to blow our sirens in the middle of the night because we don't need to wake the whole town up. And of course the radio signal, the traffic light can't tell where that's coming from. But the Opticom system, it sees the emergency vehicle coming and puts the light through the cycle. So there was a program going on that the Opticom made by 3M company, and they had a program at the time they called their small cities program, where if you had a town of under five traffic lights or less, that they had a real smoking deal on equipping your town with this system. Well, at the time we had 4 traffic lights, and they had plans for the 5th one. So we bought that system, and it included the little flashing lights that go on the vehicles are called emitters, and we bought 30 emitters. We kept 10 of them for the fire department. We gave 20 to the police department. We bought the system and had it installed. And the system's been, we now have 9 traffic lights, and the system still is doing what it's supposed to do. But this particular intersection had kind of a little bit interesting, a little bit odd effect to it. And I'm going to spin it back. I'm going to get around behind the camera this time so I can tell you a little bit about that. If you notice looking down this street, there's a little jog at the street, or sometimes called a dog leg. And what that means is that the fire truck coming, or the emergency vehicle that was coming, had to be pretty close to the intersection before the receiver or the detector could actually see the emergency vehicle coming. And so what we did on that, in order to address that by engineering, is, and let me get out here where I can see it. You can see my van parked right here. And if you go over here, you can see on down the street a ways. The fire station's down there about 3 blocks. But let me spin back around here, and I'll show you. The building right behind me is actually the Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Center. And if you look up on the side of the building, a little bit hard to see. I'll see if I can put my finger on it. Right there, there's a little device sticking up from the wall of the building. Well, that's a detector for the Opticom. And what it means is it's looking down the street, and when it sees the fire truck coming, it changes the signal light before the fire truck even gets here. So when they get here, they already have a green light. So it doesn't mean somebody's not going to run the light and hit them anyway, but it is a safety feature. As I said, all the years I worked here, about 90% of our calls came down through this signalized intersection. After I retired, I've been retired from here about 25 years, and they've added 2 more fire stations. So this one used to be the only station. Now it's the south station. There's a north station and an east station, and so a lot of the calls now are handled by those other 2 fire stations. But there's still quite the majority of the stations handled, or the runs from the south station, still have to come through this intersection. So just a little tidbit on how the engineering behind the scenes work, trying to make responses a little safer. I'm going to spin back into the sun this time and back down the street. So you can see where we came from. By the way, let me walk past the van here. That building over there is actually the sheriff's office and jail. We used to come down to a lot of calls at the jail. Obviously, you don't want to visit that as a customer. The building over here is the county complex and the courthouse. I showed you that on my drive-through video the other day. Hello YouTube, this is Chuck. It's still the same day. It was pretty congested. I was having a little trouble focusing on what I was trying to say down there at the intersection. So I figured I'd get away from there and come back here where it's quiet and try to finish up what I was telling you about the Opticom system and a couple of the technical aspects of it, and kind of how it works and some of the pitfalls that you run into with the Opticom. No system is perfect, but that's somebody put a lot of thought into that when they designed it. But anyway, I'll try to pick up where I left off and see if I can link these two videos together as to one video. If not, I'll make this one a part 2. But anyway, I mentioned in the first part, I said that, we bought 30 emitters and kept 10 of them and gave 20 of them to the police department. And the guys I had working for me at the time, we had a small crew. We were primarily a volunteer department, but we had a small core group of paid guys. We had a couple on duty at a time. And backed up by a very active group of reserves, or we called them POCs, which stood for paid on call. And we paid them by the hour when we call them out. And they were a bunch of great folks, and we had quite a number of them over the years. But anyway, that's not the story. So when we got the Opticom emitters, I had some guys that are pretty sharp, and they went ahead and installed them on our trucks. And the system, interestingly enough, I mentioned that it was a strobe light system, and it was a digital strobe system. And the digital impulse that it puts out is actually unique to each vehicle. Every emitter has its own unique signal that the system recognizes. And what it does is it logs it. And of course, this is a liability thing. But basically what it meant at that intersection, if one of the vehicles goes through it, it gives date, time, direction, and unit. So you know that if it was engine 11 went through that intersection coming from Main Street onto Beeline at such and such a time on such and such a date. And that was, I guess, some places in their world where they sold those things, they somehow got misused, and so that was another thing. It was to guard against misuse as well. But some other things that they were handy to be used for is you could get the control to open security gates, and so you could equip a security gate, and we have some private subdivisions with security gates, and you could equip the security gates with the receivers that would open the gate. So when the fire vehicle came up to the gate on a call, an example would be a high security residential area at night and somebody has a heart attack. Well, when 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, when we come rolling in there, the gate would automatically open for the emergency vehicle. And that's another real slick setup for the Opticom. Let me tell you a couple of the downsides and how they address that. One of them was, say you had them on a police car and you made a traffic stop, and in front of the vehicle, in front of your police car, while it's sitting there with the lights flashing, is an intersection. Well, that Opticom unit would hold that intersection. And it would hold the light green for you, which would mean it was red for everybody else, and it would tie the intersection up for as long as you're sitting there. Well, the way they addressed that with police cars was kind of interesting, is they hooked it into the dome light. And what would happen is when the officer opens the door to get out of the car, it turns the Opticom emitter off to let the traffic light go back to normal. The way they do it on the fire trucks is it's hooked up to the parking brake system on the air brakes for the same, and does the same thing. When you pull if we had, say we had a car fire or a wreck or something, and there was an intersection in front of us, we didn't want to sit there with our fire truck and have the Opticom hold that traffic light practically forever while we're tending to our business there at that wreck. So the way they rigged it up on fire trucks is when you pulled up to a stop and you set your parking brake, which are air brakes, then it would turn the Opticom emitter off, and it would allow the traffic light to go back to normal. Pretty slick system. Some of you guys might be a little more techie than other people, but you can appreciate it. You wouldn't want to be sitting there for a half an hour waiting for some cop to write a ticket to somebody because your light won't turn green for you. And that's how they address that particular issue. Now, we installed them on all our vehicles, and our guys were pretty handy, and as a favor to the police department, we actually installed a whole bunch of them in police cars at the time. So the Opticom system is still in use. It's still working. Back when they had some budget issues, a couple of them quit working, and they didn't have the money to fix them, but now they went back just recently and had the whole system overhauled. And so just a little added measure of safety for the fire guys and for the motoring public, because nobody wants to be involved in a wreck. And even though the system is a little expensive, The old saying goes, if it prevents one serious accident, which would result in a lawsuit against the department, it's paid for itself. And we used it for many, many years while I was still there. And there's other companies making similar systems, but that's the one we use here. So that's the one we're talking about today. So a little tidbit of knowledge about the fire business, and I'm going to let you go. So take care of each other, love each other. It's a beautiful day. We have another storm supposed to pass through tonight and tomorrow, so we might get a little bit more snow. But right now, other than being a little bit cool, it's absolutely delightful out there. So we'll catch you on the next one. So for now, I'm just going to say peace out.